Start our meeting tonight of the Public Art Commission, Thursday, August 15th, Palo Alto Civic Center. I'm going to start with our roll call. Commissioner Toback.
Present.
Commissioner Ross.
Present.
Commissioner Richter.
Here.
Commissioner Collins.
Present.
Commissioner Miyagi.
Here.
And Commissioner Usich, present. Do we have any agenda changes, requests, or deletions tonight?
Except that you forgot me, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Oh. I'm sorry, Commissioner
I'm present.
Kavanaugh. Commissioner Kavanaugh. I looked right at you, and I thought, well, I've got.
You covered me,
her.
but you didn't. There you go. I'm here.
Okay, Commissioner, we are all here tonight. Do we have any? Well, one agenda item we are changing is that item number 1 is being removed from the agenda tonight. Do we have any additional changes? Elise, no other changes on the agenda other than number 1. Okay. Oral communications. At this point, I'd like to invite members of the public to address the commission on any subject that's not on the agenda. Speaker cards can come up to the front. And we'll move on to the minutes from June 20th. Does anyone have any comment, edits on the minutes? Okay, I would like to move that we approve the minutes of Thursday, June 20th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Great. Okay. Moving on to the financial report, I'll turn it over to Elise DeMarzo.
So for the financial report, because it's the first one that we've had since the beginning of the new fiscal year for the CIP budget, we're still waiting for confirmation from accounting, but it appears that the carry forward was $166,271, and then there was the $50,000 for this year's adopted CIP, resulting in $216,271. And then if you look below under commitments, there are a number of outstanding payments still due on contracts that are underway. The subtotal of those commitments are $126,630 for an available budget of $89,641. And then below that are listed approved projects that are not yet under contract, so they're not encumbered. And those subtracted out come out to $77,770. The new items on there being the matching funds with Stanford for the University Avenue tunnels for $15,000, and the proposal for Anthony DeCenza's project for $8,270. Those are the new items.
I have a question before we move on to general fund. Under commitments on the site prep for the fountain site, I don't recollect that number being in our last view of the budget. I believe nor do I recollect, when that had come up for approval.
Those were not initially Public Art Commission funds. Those were funds that Public Works had set aside to address the issues of the fountain before the California Avenue project involved the relocation of the fountain footprint. They turned those funds over to us, which are going to go toward the site prep work for the fountain, but they were not initially Art Commission funds.
Got it. So it wasn't something that came from our, because that would be our entire year of CIP.
No, that did
funds,
not come from the Commission CIP.
Right. Okay.
It was simply.
That's why we didn't have it on our budget.
Yes.
So they actually rolled those funds into our account earmarked for that purpose.
That's correct.
Okay. Great.
I have a question.
Actually, it would help if you, when you do that, if you could put some type of notation so that we'll know that, because the Public Works Department or department may not be the only ones that we receive funds from when we're working on these type of projects, but that would let us know.
Okay, we can note that.
Thank you.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Elise, I was just wondering, maybe my memory is failing, but the Hoover Park commitment was between 20 and 30,000, wasn't it?
Yes, this is what's remaining due on the contract.
So it's been paid?
Everything has been paid except for the balance, which is paid upon installation.
I see. Thank you.
So the previous amount paid would have been in the previous fiscal year?
That's
And
correct.
this is what's for this one? Okay.
And then I had one question.
Sure.
So Elise, when you just mentioned about the approved future projects, those are totaling 77,000, and we don't subtract those out until they're actually used?
Until they're encumbered in a contract, yes.
Okay, so if I took my 216,000, which was the beginning budget, I subtract my 126, I'm left with my balance of 89.
Yes,
So
that's
if I
what's
were
remaining.
to imagine those 77 in commitments being used, then we truthfully have more like $12,000 remaining.
Right.
Okay, and there's precedent for, so for example, the artist in resident program, while approved, we haven't initiated, so potentially rolling over, or using those funds or something for something else that would come up as a priority and so on.
Right, because it's not under contract and they're not encumbered, it's a way for the commission to track what they have approved and they have set aside for those projects. But in the accounting system, they're not actually encumbered because they're not under contract.
And if the commission were to decide to change direction on any of these, we could? I mean, by
They're
bringing
not
it up?
officially committed. The commission would
Because
have
there's
to
no
make that
contract.
decision, yes.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions on CIP? We'll move on to the maintenance budget. Because it's the beginning of the year, it's a clean slate. So there is $30,000 that is set aside for maintenance. And you see the John Fisher item, which is actually a collection of a few different projects. So that his contract was for the cleaning of the piece off of California Avenue he did toward the end of the year, the Gorniak piece. And that is completed, and it also includes the coding for digital DNA, which is $2,500. So I'll give a more complete maintenance report when that item comes up. Are there any other questions on budget? Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that report. We're going to move on straight to action item number 2. Percent for art in private development projects, a presentation by Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Actually, it's a non-action.
Yeah, we're moving straight to non-action, including an update by staff on the process.
Thank you very much, and I am pleased to be able to talk a little bit tonight about the 1% for art, and just kind of, I guess, spend a few minutes thinking about public-private partnerships and how other cities, municipalities have done this sort of thing. And so I guess I do have a disclaimer at the beginning, which is that some of these examples may not actually be 1% for art examples, but they're examples of how art and buildings and development can be integrated. And so I thought they were good for the point of view of thinking more broadly about art, and that art doesn't necessarily have to be a three-dimensional object. And so we need to be flexible in thinking about that as we proceed. And then once we go through some of the images and stuff, I thought it would be good to have a discussion a little bit about some of the conversations we've had with developers in the course of the last couple of months. Elise has had a few, I've had a few, and I think others, probably Rye and others have. And I think we'll continue to have ongoing discussions, and the council's having discussions, and they have a subcommittee working on all this. So it's a really rich subject right now, and so I think it's a great time for us to get into the discussion. So that all being said, I wanted to say that starting here by saying a project could be as big as a building. I mean, literally the building itself could be a work of art. There could be components of the building. And then it could be as small as literally a flat panel display. And so, I mean, think broadly. And so I guess if you wouldn't mind moving forward. I don't have a way of tagging forward, do I? There's not that many slides. Would you mind doing it? Thanks, Elise. So I would think that Ben, among others, all of us who've flown in and out of San Jose Airport or driven by on 85, 87, I guess that is, you've seen the sort of scrim, the surround on the San Jose parking structure. And, again, if anyone knows, I'm fairly certain this is a 1% public art project. I remember that being presented. And I think what's interesting there is that it's very much an integrated project with the actual building itself. On the lower level, it's an oldie, maybe a goodie, when Frank Gehry designed a building for the advertising agency Chiat Day, who's no longer occupying that and hasn't been there for a long time. But Klaus Oldenburg was involved in the design and so was part of the binoculars building. And it's actually a building, just people occupied that space. And again, so you can think broadly about what art can be. Moving to the next example, and feel free to ask any questions. The Public Utilities Commission in San Francisco recently completed a new LEED Platinum building. So very green, very energy sustainable. They're very, very proud of this building. It's won several awards. And this is actually verifiably not an art project, but in fact, kind of actually looks like an art project. So if you stand on the street and look at the kind of the piece that sits in front of that building, so it's kind of sticking out that long fin in the front, that's actually integrated solar panels and light. Let's see, it's a wind turbine. So both solar array and wind turbine on the front of the building. And the thing actually really does move with the building. It's incredible. It looks like an art piece. That's what made me stop and look at it. And then I had to go do some research about it. But in fact, it shimmers, it moves. But it's actually a way of using supplying 7% of the building's energy. So it's a kind of, you can imagine, oftentimes we think of left brain, right brain, science and art, being kind of opposites. It's actually sort of using both sides. And I think it's an incredibly exciting example of how you can make kind of visual impact by, at the building scale. Okay, so next slide, please. This one is out in New York City, and there's lots of buildings there all the time, and they do have 1% for art. In fact, it might even be 2%. Maybe not, because they're big building budgets, but I'd have to check my reference there. Didn't keep that in my notes. But so this project is actually in the Hearst Corporation building, so Norman Foster is the architect of the building. It's an old historic building on the bottom, and then he did this kind of crazy modern piece that goes on top. But within the lobby, there's several art projects, and one of them is the water fountain that you actually sort of go up through. So that's an idea as well. But more importantly, on the wall, it's actually sort of less of the image than you can see, but way up in the back, kind of at the top of the waterfall is the piece where the escalator is going through, and then at the back is a fresco, and that's the fresco called River Lines by Richard Long. And there are several other, as I say, projects within that building. But just thinking about different ways of integrating art, I think the water fountain is an interesting idea. The fresco, the mural, there's things at the lobby that are pretty exciting. Sound sorts of things, video kinds of things. So that's another one. And moving on. So many of you might know James Turrell currently has a 3 concurrent exhibits, retrospectives around different parts of the country. Fascinating person, interesting art. And I think one of the early things that he did was to work with light. And so taking the light and putting it on the outside of buildings, putting it on the inside of buildings, but working very deliberately with architects to find ways of highlighting components of buildings that would be in and of themselves interesting, compelling, thought-provoking sorts of things. So this one is the Deerfield Academy with Skidmore, Owings and Merrill as the architect, and James Terrell, the lighting art designer, if you will. And then moving on from that. So I talked about this a lot, which is art in the landscape. I mean, there's so many different ways of thinking of art in the landscape, and this will come back to our discussion, I think, about how we would work with developers to help them think broadly about how to integrate art, because I guess the point is that it doesn't necessarily have to be, well, let me back up and think. We'll talk about the in lieu later, so let me just stay focused on the examples. So art in the landscape can be something like, where many of us are familiar with Michael Heitzer. The Bean is a great example in Chicago, and that, I guess, is just a favored example of bringing people together, making places, spaces for people. I think the plaza idea is something that has been successful here in Palo Alto, and we hope to do more of that. But I guess where I was going with the in lieu and why my thoughts were getting confused was that the developers who would be required to do a 1% may not have the capacity in their financial model to create a plaza within their private development. And so if you were to encumber them with some kind of requirement, they see it as a penalty as opposed to an opportunity. And so where you can find other open spaces or other places, maybe the city has an opportunity to create a new park, an urban park or a rural park, it doesn't matter. I mean, they can provide funds that would support another alternate art opportunity. So that's the kind of way I'm trying to think about these as examples. So the Bean creates a real plaza in the city of Chicago. It's augmented by other art places, not to mention the Art Institute and music, symphony. I don't remember all the names, but I think many of you know that area and those works. A good example, I think, is the one on the bottom. It wasn't one I was familiar with. These are from the city of Seattle. But it's a great idea, and it's something you might remember when I talked about the Stanford Business School project that I was involved in, and we had an informal 1% for art that we used. We worked with an artist from the East Bay, and one of the projects that he did was actually footprints, and there were lots of interesting ways of integrating that and what the story was. But this was another example, an older one from the city of Seattle. So thinking broadly, the next example on the next is just a bench. And I've talked to other people about it. And in fact, one of the developer conversations I had, one of the developers said, why don't we think about those benches with those bronze sculptures on them? And I said, well, we have thought about them because you've seen them around. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing that people do think about. But even light poles, bicycle, you've seen the very interesting bicycle racks. I mean, those can be opportunities. So benches, something as pedestrian, truthfully, in both ways of the word, as a bench. And then this is really the last example, and the Seattle Public Library, arguably by Rem Koolhaas, is in fact one of the sort of artworks of our time. But indeed, there are lots of projects within that, so art projects within that project. And again, that was city funded, and so many of these projects were part of their public 1% for art, which they have a very robust program. Obviously, the city of Seattle is much larger than the city of Palo Alto, but nevertheless a good example, as is the city of San Francisco for us, of setting our bars high. But this is where I gave the example earlier of even something as small as a display monitor can be a constantly changing art piece, and there can be all kinds of things within it. And it doesn't take much but a plug and a wall. So So that's kind of the kind of few examples that I provided just in creating that. Some of the learnings that I think I gathered certainly in formalizing my conversations and research about kind of 1% in a more of the public domain, the private domain rather than just public, was exactly what I mentioned earlier about this notion that developers don't want to be burdened. They feel like they're already carrying a lot of the burden for infrastructure. And it is true, indeed, that we do require them to pay for infrastructure for the city and so on. So what we were trying to do is find ways, I was trying to have conversations where we would find ways, well, what would be kind of mutually accessible? Because of course, you could sort of think, well, the first reaction is going to be, no, I'm not going to do that. But, so how can you find common ground? And I guess certainly even in the conversations, you are reminded how you can never get 100% agreement on things, which I think you have all experienced here on the commission, but we will continue to experience as we go forward. But I think along that, one of the ways that everyone, they had this experience in other communities and think it's really important is to create a public panel. So in the same way that I think this commission has been involved in creating panels of decision makers for art to implement, when you do this, you don't just rely on the developer to decide what it is, nor do you just exclusively rely on the Art Commission, but rather you really need a panel of experts. So even I had very specific examples people gave me, like, why not have someone like Roberta Katz from Stanford University, a very diverse, broad-based sort of person from what she does in her role at the university and her background, and not necessarily an artist per se, but someone who would be a good arbiter, I think, from a community perspective. The other is the director at the Oshman Jewish Community Center, a really thoughtful person. So anyway, really trying to think broadly about who those people would be and who would be involved in order to get that kind of cross-section. And then, another way to create harmony is, in thinking about the win-win, is can the city, and this is something we have to work with the city and find out what their policy will be coming forward, but is there a way to tie the success of a 1% program with something that the developer could get? So, for example, it was in Mountain View, I think, if I remember, that the developers, when they agreed to the 1% policy, not that they couldn't disagree, or that they were allowed to disagree, but they actually got something for that. So in the case of a developer, they like to build as much as they possibly can. And so they got increased density approval in order for their project to be more cost effective by agreeing to the 1% program. So that would be an example of a win-win, right? So I might say, take those funds, your 1% funds, you can do a higher density on your site, so you get more buildable area. So you're either developing more houses or more office space, whatever, more retail space, whatever it might be, which is dollars into their pocket. But then likewise, you're contributing that 1%, which is going to perhaps be in lieu some contribution that we would have for a park or a work of art somewhere else. So so that's, I guess, basically where I wanted to end tonight. I hope that was helpful in clarifying, and if there are questions or discussion, I'd be happy to help. And Elise, feel free, please.
I just wanted to give an update on where we are with the process for % for art and private. So Raina and I have been meeting with a lot of staff, and Commissioner Kavanaugh and I have been meeting with a number of developers as well, and that's been an ongoing effort. So we are scheduled to go to Policy and Services on September 10th. We want to gather their input on some of the key issues, which I believe Raina raised with the Commission in a discussion last month when I was away. And then we would return in October with specific language. The idea being that we would both amend the existing % for art policy and create an ordinance for both the municipal percent for art and for the percent for art and private development all in one package. So it is a large undertaking. It has taken a lot of research, but we're very excited about that. So hopefully we'll do policy and services in September and then October, and then it would go back to council for final approval. And I just wanted to reach out to you, since I know you all had some discussion at the last month's meeting about if you had any of those cities on that matrix that stood out to you in particular, any things you wanted to call out in particular to staff, whether it has to do with developer outreach or in lieu, or any other things that stood out to you that you would like to bring to my attention at this time.
I wasn't going to address that specifically. I wasn't actually here for that part of the discussion, but I am intrigued by the notion of building as art. And I was just wondering if any provisions could be made, or if you were aware. I'm just intrigued by the fact that Rem Koolhaas did the Seattle Public Library as a public building. And so, is there any way to kind of, as opposed to like the silo of public art in private building, like to try to encapsulate like an incentive that if they hired an architect of like world renown, that could maybe satisfy the art requirement, and that we could, I don't know. I almost feel like, a cityscape is lots of different elements, like I love the notion of like a plaza next to a sculpture, next to like just a building to behold. And so I don't know if it kind of gets that's not what we're talking about here. We've got to put some walls around it. I'm just, kind of thinking though that from like an overall city aesthetic, if we're looking at like, improving it, could that be included, or has that ever been considered, or does that make sense?
I also had a similar thought cross my mind when she was talking, and having just gotten back from Chicago and doing the architecture tour on the riverboat, and reflecting on this as well. I mean, certainly, architecture, is a form of art and clearly makes a huge impact on the visual landscape of a city. And I think what popped into my mind as you were going through those great examples at the beginning is certainly needing, as we go through this process, to define what constitutes in the percent for art, and how does that, is it through, because clearly that will also be something that those, if this were a policy in place, that those developing would have a say in too. So is landscape art, is interior design, is, what constitutes it? And this is a really good question, something artistic and visual versus an art, object, which we clearly all have had the conversation many times before. It doesn't have to be an art object, but and then who decides, which I appreciated at the end. One of the things you shared about that what other cities have done to make this successful is having that expert panel that is neither the developer nor the city, but regarded folks from the area who weigh in on this. I think that I can see that being tremendous in this. So, not an answer to what you're saying, but
right? Like
an agreement that
right. Like I feel like the worst outcome would be bland. Excuse the expression. Average building with plopped sculpture on plaza, and I mean there are way worse things. So let me just qualify that. That would still be good, but I feel like it's like the win-win is whatever is great for the city, and whatever really enlivens the spirit and does all of these things, creates community and dialogue and civic pride. And so it would be wonderful, like if the sort of the messier answer was could also be considered,
accepted. And that's what I was going to say, is I think it's going to come down to the language and how the policy is written. And I think what we're saying is that we should think of it much more broadly than really restricted. And in particular, I think that there is a way that if you, part of the policy, and again, I don't know, I'm not a legal expert in this way, and there are people who can think about how to craft the language so that it is open, but it seems to me that if you could if you could somehow institutionalize, it's a bad word, the public process part of it, this community involvement, that if they somehow also were involved in being the arbiters of what is art, that could then your landscape or your buildings because as I said on that Public Utilities Commission, that is not an art per se. I mean, there was not necessarily that there was an artist hired. They may very well have consulted some visual expert or something, but that was actually energy sources at work and how to put them together and so on. And so it seems to me that you could start to say, yes, indeed, we would consider that a beautiful work of art, and that would count. And so if your project budget is $80 million and there's a 1%, we know that of your budget, we want to see a line allocation for $800,000 that was required to make some element stand proud of the building, or that was the fee that was paid to this architect or someone that we wanted to recruit and be involved.
Well, I think one of the worst things you can have in a piece of art, if it's either looks like an afterthought or it's just stuck on. So you want to get it integrated in the beginning. I know some communities, some cities allow for the public art monies to be pooled. It doesn't specifically have to be in a building, but it could be in an area, so you can get a much larger piece that could be more iconic for that area to do that. And the other piece you're talking about is a process, and I think that's very important that you get the community involved, and so they have some ownership of the project, and then you get a lot of ideas that way too, and you can have that process. You can have a core team that goes forward with the project, and they're the ones that are involved, and they get to see it put in and completed and be there from the unveiling. And I think that's very important for the community to feel that ownership with that as well.
Did you, in your research, did you come upon any good examples of processes that, for example, like the Seattle Library, was there a certain process that led to the creation of, or?
Not necessarily. I'm sure we can come up with, I didn't per se look for those, the processes that were behind them, but that's exactly, I think, where we could certainly pull some of those as examples. But by and large, so the way projects are delivered is someone has to have a really good big picture idea from the beginning. And, as Ben was saying, and I think and even the Public Utilities Commission was awarded a design award, so a AIA, American Institute of Architects award for integrated project delivery. So they're recognizing that the project itself, doing it so well by having, and what that means is engineers, architects, landscape architects, sound engineers, acousticians, general contractor, they're all sitting at the table at the beginning, and they're laying out what the project will be like, and that's the only way to actually bring all those components together. And it sounds maybe intuitive, it's not actually how buildings are necessarily always designed and delivered. So anyway, I think there's examples of those out there, and we could probably delineate what those are and develop that if we need to. Alternatively, I have belief that the city of Palo Alto and our involved people are pretty smart, and so we could craft a pretty good way of doing it ourselves too, process-wise, but it's always good to see benchmarks and learn from others.
Excellent. Any other comments?
One comment about that HANDS project at the airport, at San Jose Airport, that's actually chain link fence up there, and it's just little dots, so it's little pixels that are up there, and that actually won a Chain Link Association Award of the Year for innovative use of chain link, and those are all hands of people that are prominent in San Jose. So that's an example of taking a big drab concrete building and making it, and every time I drive by that, I look at it and I go, look at that, wow. And in downtown San Jose, there's another parking garage on 4th and San Fernando, which has a bunch of lights on it, and it also has some panels in there, so at night, as the cars drive through there, you can see the lights change. So, there's ways to take big drab concrete buildings and make them and activate them and make them look really nice and look like a piece of art.
I think two other notes that I had made, and maybe they don't need to be said, but I'll say them. One is that I think the city of Palo Alto, certainly even our own project, looking at the tunnel, but also just around town with the murals, is we aren't just trapped in only three-dimensional objects. I mean, but we do have a preponderance of those. I mean, just when you think about what art we think of, and California Avenue, which is one of our discussion points later, I mean, there's just a lot of three-dimensional sculpture. So starting to think about other media and ways of, maybe just alternatives to that. I also thought about water and sculptures, and of course, as my daughter said to me, "How do you make water?" Earlier today, I said, "Well, you can't," and that's the whole reason that we need to treat it as such a precious resource, because it's not just everywhere and infinite. So anyway, I'm not a huge water fountain person. On the other hand, if it's integrated in that it's somehow the building's wastewater and it's being reused, and maybe it's a demonstration of capturing and cleaning or something like that. I mean, that's a way to do it, and that's the integration of it, and that would require the finesse of an artist working with engineers and architects to pull that all together. So to me, I mean, those are the kind of really exciting things that we can do going forward.
Well, the Bay Bridge is the biggest public art project.
There you go, right.
Probably on the West Coast, and it's all lights.
Yeah, right.
So as we're talking about this, and this is a really exciting topic, and I think time for us, public art in Palo Alto, it also makes me think how great it would be to have this kind of conversation with a broader audience. And, it would be great to all think about what kind of way and venue to share these kinds of examples. I mean, certainly with City Council, but I think beyond that as well, especially, as this process goes forward in the coming months. I mean, one thing that just popped to mind for me right now was, in the past we have held some speaker series before where we've had artists from the city of Palo Alto come and talk and create conversation around works of art in Palo Alto. And I could see doing something like this, when the new community room at the main library, or even before that, but in a space in town to bring some people to have these kinds of conversations about what's possible, invite developers to come and partake in this conversation about just getting excited about possibilities in our city. I think, that's just something I wanted to share that crossed my mind.
Well, when this 1% for private public art comes into being, it's going to really be a paradigm shift for the commission here in the thinking, because somebody mentioned $800,000 for public art. I mean, when you're only talking thousands or maybe tens of thousands of dollars for a project, all of a sudden you're getting into hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars for a public art project, and that's a real shift in thinking of how things are done and how you follow through and how the process of getting all that done through completion.
And I think it gets a lot more people's attention as well, even in talking about what the process would be and who's, weighing in on the whole thing. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things I think it's also important to remember that the commission and staff has discussed about moving forward with this is how important the public outreach and the involvement in the public art master plan is. Most cities use that as a guideline for their percent for art and private development, so that the consultants who are brought in to assist with the process on project by project are guided by that vision, which was created by the community. So I think that's an important thing to remember as we move forward as well.
Yeah.
So
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
you ready?
And thank you, Elise. Okay, we're going to move on to number 3, University Avenue Tunnel Art, update by Commissioner Toback on status of panelist meeting.
Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to give the update that we had a great selection panel meeting this week. We met to narrow down the artist pool that we'll be requesting specific proposals from. We had 7 people on the panel. We had 3 commissioners. We had representation from IDEO. We had representation from Stanford and a local artist that's in our collection, and also from the Downtown Business Association. So it was a really great, decisive meeting. We had lots of submissions. We had narrowed it down to 22, and then from there, during the selection process, we narrowed it further down to 5. And those artists work in, all different mediums, so we're excited to see what kind of proposals they come in with. They'll be notified sometime this week, and then from that time that they're notified, they will have a month to submit their specific proposals. In which time, and then the selection committee will come back together, and we'll have a great project to move forward with. So we're all really excited. Any questions or anything that I missed or?
I have one question, which is, so once the, I think, RFP has gone out to them for their 30 days to develop their project of those 5, then as commissioners, are we notified by Elise or staff of who the 5 are? It's just intriguing, and I know we are a public agency, so we wouldn't be able to know that now in advance of them knowing, so.
Absolutely, everyone will be updated.
And what is the goal in the end? Is the selection of one of the 5 or more than one of the 5?
One project, right? One vision. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyone else? Great, thanks for that update, Commissioner Toback. I'm going to move on to number 4, California Avenue Corridor. We have a presentation by Shahala, is that right?
Shala, yeah.
Shala, sorry.
Here, you can do this now.
Yazdi, Engineer, Planning and Community Environment. Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Shala Yazdi, Planning Transportation Engineer, making a presentation, giving you an update on the California Avenue Streetscape Project. Oops. Oh, sorry for that. I don't know what happened. Did I just exit? Where'd it go? Sorry about that. Because I just lost it. I'll find it.
Which one do I turn?
Let's hold this down.
Oh, you have to hold it down. Okay, thanks.
I apologize for that. Let's start all over again. Okay, so the vision of the street, this project started about 2010, where we started the whole community outreach process and the grant application for the funding for the streetscape project. So the vision for the street was to promote pedestrian and bicycle safety, complement adjacent land uses, and stimulate activity on the street, provide aesthetic enhancements, balance all the needs of modes of travel, including pedestrians, cars, bicyclists, and also transit. And also the project was to support public transportation access. The proposed project does maintain efficient vehicle movements. We are reducing the 4 lanes of travel down to 2. That will give us wider 15-foot lanes, enough room for bicyclists and cars to maneuver in safely. Parking will remain diagonal and parallel. We're widening sidewalks, so that's definitely a lot of room for pedestrians and bicyclists. We are providing pedestrian improvements across California Avenue. That would be the enhanced crosswalks, pretty much where the crosswalks are now. They will be a highly visible red. I'm not sure if you've seen the crosswalks near Stanford and El Camino. Those are the thermoplastic that we use. So it's been really, I think we've been getting a lot of compliments and it's been working very well. So we hope to use that for the project as well. And increased amenities, including streetscape furniture all along the street, including the plaza, and increased landscaping and also pavement aesthetics, which I talked about. So there's going to be colored concrete and colored and textured concrete. So I have the way I've set up here is I've gone block by block. I know it's really hard to see, but this is pretty much the whole streetscape vision, including the amenities, which I have photos of for you later. And then you'll see some of the trees highlighted above in the landscaping. So El Camino is on your left side, and you'll see the one lane in each direction. The south side of the street is on the bottom corner. We are doing a significant widening in this section of the block. So that's between El Camino and Ash. We're widening about 12 feet. So and with that, we are adding seat walls, trees, also bike racks, and again, opportunity for businesses to provide outdoor seatings. And this was really welcomed from the merchants. You'll see I wish I had my laser pointer, but there's a crosswalk here which will be enhanced, and we have provided bulb outs on pretty much these corners here. We had to relocate this crosswalk a little bit to provide for, we were required to extend the left turn lane here. So we are providing a new bulb out. And just a side note, this little pink dot represents the art locations of the public art. So at this location, we are reconfiguring the median. Most of the items will remain in place during construction. They will be protected. A few of the pieces will be removed and stored safely during construction and brought back, including the flagpoles. And we have been in contact with the artist, Susan Steinman, to kind of go over the reconfiguration of how the median should look or would look afterwards. It is going to be narrowed, so she might want to move around some of the pieces. So again, going up on the north side, we're adding a bike corral that's kind of a colored. I'm not sure if you've seen it within the city. We take the piece of pavement, it's colored in. I think we were not going to use the green, but the ARB did approve a red color, again with the bike racks. And so if you continue on to, this is the alleyway. Again, we're providing enhanced crosswalks. And if we move down,
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just curious, is the median going away?
Oh no.
The median's still in the middle of the street?
Yes. Which median are you referring to?
Well, like
The one where the art is. Right?
Yeah, we're.
Oh no, we're keeping the median. We're just removing the curb a little bit, so we have to reduce the median a bit, but it's staying.
Okay,
Yes.
no, it's just kidding.
No, I'm glad you asked. Please.
You don't see it here. Oops.
So the section between Ash and Birch, we are providing a what we like to call it a central plaza. And this is, we've provided kind of red striping, pavement markings, and the sidewalks, the curbs will be removed, and we'll provide like pretty much a flush curb from Ash, kind of right up to where this crosswalk is. Opportunity for public events, festivals, art and wines, and they can, again, close off the streets, and the pedestrians can have, pretty much walk across the street and sidewalk and not have a curb.
Is that at all times?
No, only during
When it would be
specific
closed
times
off?
when the city
Okay.
decides to, or the merchants want to, farmers market, or any other event, really. We are placing bollards, trees, landscaping, and I do have photos coming up of some of the streetscape furniture that we're placing. Moving along, again, corners are bulbed out. Public art will remain. We're not touching the medians here on either side, actually. And let's see. And Birch to Park Street, again, wider, bulb out, sidewalk widening in this corners, enhanced crosswalk, a lot of trees, seat walls, benches, and new trash receptacles all throughout. And Park Boulevard to the plaza, again, corner enhancements with the trees and landscaping, furniture. And I do have a bigger picture of the plaza for you here. So this is where we're doing pretty significant. So I'm not sure if you remember, but this plaza is pretty much like almost half this size, or like 3/4. So this is where the diagonal parking is now. We are removing the parking, widening the plaza, and providing more, decorative pavement, news racks, trees. We do have a kiosk kind of for, I guess anyone just kind of business. We don't have the kiosk information identified yet, but mainly for merchant information, the stores that are on and restaurants are on California Avenue. This is the fountain. Michael Zabo, we've been working very closely with him, our consultants, and him have been collaborating and finalizing the design. And this is the bike tunnel. We're providing kind of roadway markings, allowing for ingress and egress from the bicyclists safely. We have openings on the ramp so that hopefully they can kind of safely stay on the side as they enter the tunnel and not kind of go through the plaza. We do have benches, game tables, a drinking fountain that will include an option for pets as well, and picture is included in the next slides. We do have new, all the bike lockers will be moved away. That's Caltrain has accepted responsibility, and they will be moving most of the bike lockers to their parking lot. And so we'll be putting bike racks here, and also the VTA bike share station will be relocated to this location. I believe they're being put on park right now temporarily. This is the fountain. I'm sure you've seen. There's going to be boulders placed around it. I'm not sure if this is
That was the original.
This is the original. It is not going to look like that, but I think that we just didn't have another photo, but definitely that's how it's going to look. And this is some of the boulders that will be placed around the fountain. And these are some of the latest images provided by Michael Zabo. These are some of the plaza furniture that we played. This is the kiosk, the drinking fountain that includes an option for pets as well, the benches, and this actually we had proposed a green screen along the Caltrain. We will not be placing that. Caltrain does not allow, that's pretty much their right of way, and they wanted to keep that free, so I should have taken that off. I'm sorry. And again, the game tables, the bike racks, and this is kind of a sample of what the bike share facility would look like. And this is, again, similar to the plaza, but an extension through the rest of the street where you'll see the benches, the bike racks. These will be the granite seat pads placed along, just can be used for seating. This is the pots that we have that are placed at some of the bulb outs and the trash receptacles. The newspaper racks will all be consolidated into modular units. Street lights and the pedestrian scale lighting is also a newly added element to the project. We're really excited to be able to do this. So this is the latest street light and the pedestrian scale lighting that will be throughout the whole streetscape, and in addition to the plaza. The plaza will have the pedestrian scale lighting. The next steps is we will be finalizing the bid package in the fall and to go out to bids shortly thereafter, and then for construction to begin December. And the plan is to kind of start off where the plaza is, do the work around the tunnel while school's out, and make sure that the work is not around the tunnel, and then have the contractor kind of move to the rest of the plaza as school starts. So that's our schedule. Questions and comments, if anyone
Yeah,
has any.
thank you very much for coming. We've been anxiously waiting to hear
Oh,
what's
sure.
going on, and we've been mulling over the California Avenue tunnel for years, and so we were kind of waiting to see what your plans were with the tunnel. At one point, you were going to open it up halfway, but that does not sound like it's happening.
Yeah, that was, I think, part of the original vision of what we want. There was just not enough budget to be able to do that. And it was never, unfortunately, I think that was the consultant had his vision, and it was just the budget did not allow for something like that.
Well, from an art perspective, we've been wanting to work on the Cal Ave tunnel. Everybody loves the ocean,
Yes.
the whole concrete ocean, except for the actual tunnel is starting to fall apart and needs to be repaired, one. And two, once you do that, we'd need to put in new art. Have you guys talked about this at all or had any discussions on what's going to happen? Are you going to repair the Cal Ave tunnel?
Well, the project, we're not touching the tunnel. We haven't, if it's deemed like it might, we're not doing major concrete work on that side that would cause it damage. Unfortunately, the scope of this project did not include repairing the tunnel. I mean, that's something that I think could be brought up, Public Works at a later time, but unfortunately, this project was mainly just the streetscape, including the plaza.
So then, okay, because we were kind of waiting to hear from you before we moved ahead with redoing the art, because if you were going to open the tunnel. So I guess we can just go ahead then with what we were originally doing.
Essentially, yes, it would have to be a separate project. So if they're looking to start their construction over winter break, clearly we don't, if they're going to do something in the tunnel, we may or may not be able to coordinate something at that time, but it would probably make more sense to wait until the construction's complete at the site before we were able to make an adequate plan to do something there. But my understanding is there's nothing in the works for that tunnel. I did meet with someone who does a lot of the electrical work for the city, and he said, the challenge with that tunnel, as with the University Avenue tunnels, is that much of that wiring is the conduit and whatnot is run through the concrete. So in order to boost capacity, you would essentially have to open up the tunnel, which when you're under Caltrain opens up a big can of worms. So I don't know that there's been any discussion about doing anything there immediately, but it was removed from this scope of work. But I've certainly been in contact with Shala and let her know that the commission's interested in doing something there. I guess it's a matter of just finding the appropriate time.
Okay. Yeah, I know, speaking of lighting in that particular space, I mean, that's a lot of the feedback that many of us get, even when talking about the subject of art, is like that the first thing that needs to be addressed is that the light is poor down there. And I know that this came up in our conversation on the University Avenue pedestrian tunnels, just as we met with a panel. Even some of the artist proposals involved bringing in lighting that was not inside the walls, but attached from the outside of a wall. And I don't know, from a public works perspective, if that is, to the right kinds of codes to do. But many artists have, they add elements of light that are actually attached outside the wall that aren't from wiring inside, which is another whole potential opportunity. But I mean, we as a commission have been really interested in this area, knowing also that the existing mural is in disrepair at this point. But we've also probably all of us heard from the community a desire to to enhance this tunnel with art and lighting. And so we were curious as to, what thoughts or information the Public Works has, even from the community. It sounds like it's not part of this project at all. Is it something that's even on the radar at this point for public? Is it on the list at all from a public needs standpoint, or infrastructure, or is the feedback about even the way that bikes go under there, is that still the new pedestrian and bike underpass at Alma, which is obviously much shorter, is sort of a new modern thoroughfare. Do they do those racks anymore that you go through on the way down, or is it been in any conversation?
Thank you for that. We have heard from the community. We did have a lot of meetings, and they did express lighting at the plaza. Not necessarily a tunnel. I think that's inside the tunnel was really something that we couldn't provide, but we are adding pedestrian scale lighting. I'm trying to think about at least 10 that I know of, if not like more. I know that we were going back and forth because they didn't want it too lighted, but we are putting in 10 pedestrian scale lightings in the plaza itself, so that should certainly help at nighttime. The condition of the tunnel and where it is as far as the priority, now that would be Public Works. I'm in the planning and community environment, so that's something that, that's a separate process. I believe they do assess this, so that's unfortunately was not included in our scope to do this.
Thank
but
you. Okay.
That conversation, doesn't mean that conversation can't happen.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I would, from the commission standpoint, and this would go through Elise then to Public Works. One of the questions I would have for them around this is if we wanted to go forward in exploring options and pursuing ideas around it, and artists that could potentially even, we could even specify work with light-related types of art. Is it something that utilities or Public Works or another part of the city has an interest in and would financially also have an interest in partaking in a project like that? So that would be a question I have for staff to look into.
Well, it's something I can certainly bring up with Public Works. They have been very open to incorporating art into various projects. It's just a matter of in their CIP funding and their list of projects where that falls in the matrix of their priorities.
Sure.
But I'm happy to go investigate further.
Thanks. Thanks for your presentation.
I have one question. Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the plaza. Is there an opportunity for some small public art projects in there, like benches, flower pots, and possibly the concrete wall, to do something where maybe an artist or a local artist can design something for, if you're going to put a bench in, why not put in something that's kind of cool to somebody's design, a piece of art, functional and...
Well, I know that the streetscape furniture that we did put in, went through the ARB process. So the benches and the the game tables and the concrete, the seat walls did go through a few reviews, and we did get approval. The fountain is the public art piece that we've been working with the artist and with Elise to make sure that the location and where it'll be placed. So I'm not aware of any other art being placed at the plaza.
So that's being considered the 1% for art, then the fountain?
The fountain, I believe, was already. Maybe Elise can explain kind of how that came about.
So what is the 1% for art then?
So the history on the fountain, just to clarify, it was commissioned a number of years ago and selected by the Public Art Commission. It's been on hold since we were told that the footprint of the fountain would need to move because it was very close to that tip where the vehicular traffic is. And once we found out that this project was moving forward, it made sense to everyone to move the fountain more to the interior of the renovated plaza and make it more of a central focal point. The project, I guess you can speak to the funding issue.
Well, this project is funded by grant funding, and grant funding for this does not allow for 1% for art. So we're really kind of bound to that, but we do feel that it is streetscape, and we did try to beautify it as much as we could. So, and again, we've been working very closely with the Michael Zalber project, and we feel so that's, I think our consultants have been working with his consultants and actually with him. So that's something that we're excited about as well.
I have a question also if you could flip to the slide on the elements of the bench and so forth. I remember when this project was first introduced to us to follow on Ben's question, that I remember that it was presented to us. They were showing, looking at different kinds of options for these things, and they did hear input from the commission, and we did hear that it would be ARB would be the approvers of doing it. One of the questions I had was that at the time they were looking at, some of those granite pieces you had up there were actually going to be the bollards as well, but that was when the fountain was quite close to the edge. Are those now needed any more bollards, or is it trees, or what's functioning as that currently?
We're actually not putting in, well, we do have these stones, which I believe could act like bollards around the fountain. The boulders, they're more like boulders. I don't know if you can see the page on the far left that kind of shows where the boulders will be. We are actually, what I've just found out, there is going to be a seat wall around the fountain.
Oh,
Not like the one on top, but the reason for that being that the fountain was going to be at ground level, and I think they had to put the seat wall in so that there won't be public interaction with the water. And I think if that happens, the water district had new rules and restrictions and requirements that we were not able to comply to. So I think Michael Szabo and our consultants came up with, well, why don't we put a seat wall around the fountain, and
that regulation then didn't come to play downtown at Lytton or at.
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Right,
I mean, what happened?
Quite interactive.
and I think they're trying to. I mean, I've heard that the allowing public interaction with the water just opens up a new can of worms and new requirements and regulations, liability. So that we do have the seat walls and the boulders. But to answer your question, we're not putting up bollards. We have moved the plaza more central. It's centered now, so we don't feel that it would. Yeah, it's not too close to the curb.
And one final question on this, if you flip to the lighting one, I guess my question in general is the elements then, it's need to have these new types of, lighting and streetscape items. Are these choices then going to be something that roll out throughout the city? Like I know there's the Stanford Avenue intersection is new with the new pavers, and they have a kind of a very traditional type of lighting there. So then you drive 2 blocks down and now it's quite a modern look. So what are we doing in Palo Alto as far as the look? Or is someone looking at that as a city?
I agree, because I think going through the community and listening to the community, we heard some wanted traditional, a lot of people wanted modern, with this project and the consultants that we worked with, the landscape architects, we tried to give a mix of both. We have a lot of the bricks that are there, but you're right, the lighting is modern. We did go through quite a bit of changes with the types, and again, this was the final approved versions. We had many that the ARB commented on. But I'd like to think this is a combination of modern and traditional.
Right, and I'm not saying I don't like it. What I'm just wondering is this now the new model for, because we just did, have a new intersection a few blocks away that with quite a different look. I mean, it struck me once as I was driving down El Camino within a close span. And so I had thought, oh, maybe we're rolling now toward the traditional look because we have the 70s look right now at California Ave. Maybe this is now the way we're rolling, but no, we're not. This is cool. I like it, but I'm just wondering, I think community input's great to an extent, but also is someone making aesthetic choices?
This would be
city,
the ARB that
ARB.
made the decision and could probably weigh in on their vision of the street.
Is this the new, right?
Yeah, and
that'd be a good question then for them.
I mean, I'm not sure what their few, but again, we did go to them with a few options, and we got a lot of comments back. So that's really something in their purview.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to just pipe in one last. So you had a question and comment slide, and I had one of each.
Yes.
Just the, in our packets, there was the existing art element assessment.
Yes.
And that was commissioned, I'm sure, part of the project so that we could understand it, and I looked at that in advance. And so were there any questions for the commission about working with any of the artists or anything, or does that all just seem to be taken care of as part of the scope of the work, or was there anything that needed to kind of come to our attention for any reason?
We just really wanted to give the commission an update on the impact to all of those artworks because there is such a concentration of artwork on CalLab. So we have worked very carefully to make sure that all the artworks have been identified, that they will be protected in place. And really it's the two gateway pieces that we're most focused on that have any impact. So California Avenue, California Native, which is on the El Camino intersection. We've been in contact with the artist about which of those elements will be temporarily removed and then reintegrated into the site. And then, of course, with the plaza and the relocation of the fountain from the tip into the heart of the plaza and what those implications are.
So then, thank you. My comment was maybe one that, of course, the drawings are done and the bids are going out, but the kiosk seems to be in an odd location in that there's basically, if I'm reading that and understanding it correctly, you kind of are at the very end of the street next to the railroad tracks. And while the plaza will be enhanced, it doesn't seem like that's where the traffic flows. So if you're trying to get people like an orienting device, isn't that the railroad tracks right there? Because there's the kiosk. And so it's almost like even if it were at the other end, the pedestrians come up out of the tunnel or away from the train. But, I mean, maybe there's, I just know my use of that area. I don't think I've ever been in that little corner over there just because it's sort of that, unless you're circling around. So for what it's worth, do you have a thought about why it was positioned there?
I know they did want to, the bike racks were, I know they wanted to have easy access to the bike racks for, people getting out of the trains. And of course, there's the VTA bike share, so that has to be visible. And it is.
I didn't understand that. So right there, that is where the VTA bike share is, because I'm not seeing that identified on your call out. That would make sense if that's.
This is the VTA bike share.
Oh, okay. Well then.
So yeah, and this is where the bike racks are now. We're replacing all the bike racks, and I believe we have like 18 at that location, at this location. And the idea of the kiosk was, this is really just landscaping. And, we've got the seat walls, but I know that they did want to place it where the pedestrians would come out of the train station. And I see what you're saying, but
it's just a path of travel thing, right? Yeah. So that if you think that the people who come there aren't going to know their way around, or maybe they're the regulars who come off all the time and grab their bike and go to work and then bring it back at the end of the day. I don't know how that's going to work, but in any event, you may just noodle on that if it's
there's another kiosk on also
on the other end.
Yes.
Oh, that'd be good.
There's I believe a few
bookends.
And
okay.
this and I think this was really for pedestrians who just got out of the train or hanging around the plaza. We'll walk over there, sit down,
right
under a tree.
Yeah, thank you.
Just did I cut you off?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I can only imagine the amount of opinions you have. I've got tons of this on this. We use California Street and the tunnel all the time. I think it's so disappointing that the tunnel isn't part of the whole remit because it's sort of the entry point to get there for a lot of us. My comment is really to the commission because I'm feeling like, and I just would like to ascertain whether I'm the only one here, that it's one of the bigger, more major, and I'm a newer citizen of this town, so I don't know that the last time it had a facelift, but to me it just seems like this opportunity to really evaluate all of the public art on the street, because I happen to believe that, and it's in my responsibilities as a commissioner to evaluate the work of meritorious, that public art is of a meritorious element. And I've got some issues with some of the art that's on California, and I am not the only one. In fact, I feel like it's a huge lightning rod for negative opinion about public art in this city, and I feel like we could maybe take the whole street and evaluate everything from that we have for public art that's on it. I happen to think that at the top of the street at El Camino, the wayfinding and the mixture of public art with that is a little odd. And I'm just kind of wondering, with the fact that we're like redesigning the whole street to be more pedestrian friendly, can we make it more aesthetically friendly? And do we have that within our remit? And does anybody else agree with me?
I mean, that was our conversation at dinner tonight, was why don't we remove some of those? I mean,
yes.
It actually came from my 11-year-old daughter. She's like, can we get rid of some of that stuff? You know, and I was, not a bad idea. So it might be worth evaluating, since we have been working on California Avenue. We might be able to take an opportunity, if you're expanding the street anyway.
Well, I mean, it's completely being revamped. It's completely being reevaluated for what it is, which is a major, gathering thoroughfare. I think it would, of course, everything by artists' rights, but owing to the fact that the work went in site-specific to what it may have been when it went in, and now we're looking at use of this street in a totally different way, I don't know. I would urge a special meeting of the commission to sit down and go through this and see, with staff what can and can't be done, or recommendations of what can and can't be done.
I have just a question and a comment on that. I, to some degree, agree, and I think it's interesting that this is coming up on the heels of Commissioner Kavanaugh's proposal, and how do we think about, integrating how does architecture and artwork all come in. So it's interesting that, this seems like a natural conversation to have following that, because it raises similar questions. So I agree with what you're saying, but my question also is, are all of these pieces permanent? Were any of them deemed temporary but then stayed? Or what is the status of most of these? Are they...
The sculptural works, I believe, were all commissioned as permanent pieces. Most of the murals inherently are commissioned under a temporary contract, but I would have to go through and look at them project by project. They were all done in partnership with the various businesses and with CADA.
And that being said, permanent pieces, it doesn't mean that they can't, and we haven't recited pieces in our city that are in a space that no longer is being used for the same type of thing, or are deemed to be better off in another space. But there's also the legal aspect, as Amanda had said, and I think that I would support having a special meeting on this topic, so that both staff and the commission could sit and just to address and discuss. It would be helpful even to have a legal person from our legal department in talking through that as well, making sure we're all up to speed on the artist right issues as well. Because each, as I know from coming on board, our legal contracts with artists have now taken a different kind of turn, but through time they have varied and been different. So it may be even that each different pieces on that street have different kinds of legal agreements that would be important for us to know. Having been a member of an earlier subcommittee on the CalAv art, I have been part of conversations about how there are pieces that feel like they could be better served elsewhere, and to the point of the entryway in particular, and the loss of what the meaning of the piece is there. And it was interesting because I noted on this sheet we'd gotten in our packets that the one piece listed of all of them that said a new location was to be determined is the Cal Native piece. And I heard it mentioned a few times during the presentation, but it didn't sound, explain to me, because I just saw that on our sheet, new location to be determined, and it's definitely has been in commissioner conversation before that that piece could do well to be recited. It sounded from the presentation like the assumption is that it would go back in somewhere in the vicinity it's in so that is not a new location, or?
It's not a new location. The elements are all going to be reintegrated into the site.
But some
Into
of
the
the
media.
elements are not others, or it was said that there's a number of, there's rocks, there's pavers, there's flags.
Right. All of those elements are going to be
The plan is-
reintegrated once the curbs are moved.
Right, so so none of them were considered at whether they'd come or stay. The assumption is that they all stay.
Would stay.
Is the sign being redone at the top of the street, the California Avenue?
No, that will also remain.
The entry sign, okay.
I think it might be a potential minefield if you start doing something just unilaterally. I think you need to get the public involved because everybody has an opinion about art, whether it's good or bad, and you have one opinion. There's other people that have an opinion, and it could be a real minefield if you start doing something like this without getting the public involved. And I think you really need to get the public involved because California Avenue is the main thoroughfare, and a lot of people use it, and a lot of people have opinions about it. There's a Ruth Asawa piece up in San Francisco where the new Apple building was going to go in. They were going to take it out. Big public outcry. Apple is redoing their plans. They're going to keep that fountain there. So, you can talk about it, but I think you need to really think it through and get the public involved, or you're going to have big problems.
And I agree with that, and I'm not so unhappy with the art on Cal Ave, primarily, I guess, because I've heard the history of what they call it, because they call it the Avenue of the Arts, and specifically because we have the different diverse types of pieces there. And believe me, there are some pieces I don't care for either, but I don't think that I'm in a rush to have them move. And I guess the biggest lesson for me has been the fact that when I first came on, the first thing that came up was that fountain. That fountain almost divided this community. So before we talk about, taking a piece of art or us as a commission, it's something that I think goes off into the bigger discussion, because when I've gone to the Cal Ave meetings, they've been pretty heated. So even the fact that now that you've got people filing lawsuits, so I just don't want it to get lost in the fact that this is that this sounds like it's trivial, because it's not trivial, and it is something to be taken with heart. Art is probably one of the most controversial, is more controversial than politics. So, it's, I would say let's discuss it more among ourselves, because I think that I hear all of us wanting to do something and not being left out of this process, and not just leaving it as it is. I mean, there is we got left out of another process. I'll just bring it up, the fact that we got left out of the plaza, the Lytton Plaza, and it is not something that has been, the only thing that we were allowed to even keep was a piece of sculpture, which comes up in discussion in the next one. And but every time I run across a friend of mine who's been downtown and seen that water fountain, they say, "Oh, why did you guys put the bathtub out there?" Or, why didn't you put some color? Or why, we get the blame for that. It comes back to saying that this is something that happened with the Art Commission. So I would like to see us get more integrated, particularly with the elements, particularly with the information that was presented tonight. There is still room for the Art Commission to work with the flower planters and the seating at this point. I mean, I know you're saying that the ARB have always been our friend. I said in the past. They have always been our friend. And I would think that if we could come up with ideas of how we could make it more interesting to integrate some artistic ideas with things like seating and just the general area in and around there, because that is going to be the most controversial part of the plaza. I mean, nobody hangs out at Lytton Plaza anymore. It's kind of dull down there. But
I guess I would just wanted to add to say that it does seem to me that maybe it is a process question about when projects are initiated, how the Art Commission can engage. But I think to
We've
focus.
been at this at the beginning, but we're still getting left out, is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, so I just am speaking to this example, and that I think this ship has sailed, the proverbial, because they're ready to bid and they got a grant for it, and maybe that's why it wasn't part of the process.
We should have been told.
But I do think that it's one of those things that, I don't know where 2 or 3 years ago when it was, when the trees were cut down and it was all over the paper, where that was in the city process and why that didn't hit the Art Commission. I wasn't part of it. I wasn't, but.
It did hit the Art Commission.
Yeah.
It was presented, and we weighed in at the meeting about ideas and formed a subcommittee. The subcommittee met a few times, and then I know with Elise, one of the things that was done was weighing in through the planning on sort of the protection of the art along the plaza. But I think what we're hearing is that the other elements on the street were never considered to be, that we weren't considered to be the approvers or decision makers around it. And so even though we saw some of the ideas they had at the beginning, that didn't fall within the scope of what staff for the Art Commission or the subcommittee were working on. And again, it harkens back to your earlier presentation on just broadening scope of what art can be as well.
And about ship sailing, I never believed that ships sail that fast. I mean, they move very, very slowly. So, and this process is, I'm still waiting all this time to see the results of our Mitchell Park Library for our artwork that we paid for and spent time. And there's still changes that may still occur, even at the last minute, because I know you've been negotiating on the boards on the inside of what type, even down to the last thing of now changing things like what kind of chalk we're going to be using, because things change. But anyway, I just want you to hear what we're saying is that there still may be some room in there, even with coming to us and just at least informing us and letting us know and letting us maybe even have some part of the process that we can even veto some of these things if we have to. I guess that's the only problem that I have, but I'm not for actually going and changing California Avenue, because that's what it is now. It's known as Avenue of the Arts, and I like to see it kind of improve.
So, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
It feels like we have a lot to say around this, and I would like to call a special meeting for this particular topic, so we can circle back on some of these issues and come with more information about them. Thanks, Ben, for your comments about public input. I do agree with that, and I think that is part of that conversation is how we would go about doing that, and for us to just further delve in on all the topics we've brought up tonight. So with that, let's wrap up this item tonight on our agenda, and thank you for coming to present this and getting us started on this conversation tonight and informing us of where things are in the project.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Can I just ask one other question? I'm just curious as to what else, other than moving the bike lockers, what else is Caltrain doing in relationship with the plaza, or are they doing anything in relationship with the plaza?
They're not doing anything. I've shown the plans to them, that is part of their right-of-way along the roadway that goes around the plaza. They will be moving the bike lockers to their property. I'm not sure the location's yet to be determined, but that's pretty much their involvement that we've had to date.
Because that's a potential collaboration right there. Yeah.
I mean, we did, there is that green screen that I talked about, but they're pretty particular about requirements with rail and clearance. So that's pretty much, again, just the area around the plaza.
Okay.
And how many parking spaces are we getting from this?
You mean how many are we?
Well, we're not losing any.
We're not losing. I thought at one point we were getting 17 more was the last figure
we
I had heard.
were, and I think we are now only gaining 5 more.
Oh, okay.
And we wanted to do further widening to the eastern side of this eastern section of the street. I mean, I think we're doing a lot of widening on the western, where all the business are, the restaurants, and I think the idea was, well, provide more widening bulb outs There's a lot of offices towards the end where the plaza is, but the idea is that businesses will come. So we're really trying to flourish the eastern section of the street.
And how's
as well.
Molly Stone doing? Are they supportive?
Very supportive, yes.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on to item number 5, maintenance, update by staff on digital DNA coding, etc.
Good evening. So, digital DNA that I mentioned earlier is the sculpture on Lytton Plaza, which Commissioner Richter referred to earlier. And we've been in contact with the artist and with the conservator. There was a conservation report that went around previously about the fact that the coating on the boards has failed, and prolonged exposure uncoated is going to continue to compromise the integrity of those boards. So the artist is actually going to be in Palo Alto in the end of August. So she's going to go in and replace a couple of the boards that need replacing, tighten up the bolts, do any of that kind of hardware work. And then in September, we plan to have the conservator come do the coating, which should last for a few years, while I know the commission's been discussing whether or not we relocate this piece. So it is a life preserver, but it does seem like it's going to be a good option to at least keep it from falling apart in the meantime. I can give you a detail.
Can I ask a question while you're doing that?
Here, yes.
When she's going to come in and replace, are we talking about moving the piece again, or is she going to do it in place?
Everything is being done in place. There are no cranes. It's not moving anywhere. Keeping it easy.
Okay.
So that's my report on digital DNA. We are starting to have the art handling crew work on some waxing. So they did go through and wax and clean 5 different sculptures in the last month in preparation for heading into the fall and the rainy season. And we have identified 12 pieces that need to be either framed for the first time or reframed, that the frames have fallen apart. And then we can say that the entire collection has finally been framed, which is an exciting moment for those of us who have been working on this for so many years. So I anticipate that I will return next month with an estimate if once those numbers start creeping up to the $3,000 mark, and I will definitely keep the commission appraised of where those numbers are. The only other piece that I'm working on that I will report on next month, or possibly need to ask for funds for, is for Skyhook Boca Raton. If you recall last year, the commission, this is a piece in the Art Center in the Sculpture Garden. The commission did approve funds, and we got into contract with the artist Peter Shire to create a new base, this piece I'm highlighting here, for something that's more durable. This was meant to be a temporary base long ago. And when we started really looking at it and getting into the details of attaching the base and how we were going to get a crane and move the piece and put in the new base, we realized the pad is in really poor shape and is settled and is not level. And so we really recommend, while we have the piece moved and while we're putting a new base in, to go ahead and pour a level pad for it that's going to be more substantial and hold over time. So I'm getting estimates for that. I had hoped I would have that by this evening, but I don't. So I will return with that next month. Are there any other maintenance questions?
Just quickly, related to you mentioning about the framing the pieces, it made me think of also photography. And I know there was some talk of Camera Club coming back to photograph more of our work. I was reminded of it as I've been flipping through the catalog of our collection that Darlene put together for us, that we even have some sculptures and so forth that aren't yet on there. Any plans in the works for the Camera Club to continue their great efforts on our behalf?
There's nothing concrete in the works. However, in the next presentation, there is a piece that I bring up that does not have a photograph. The other thing that we've spoken about as, with the commission and also for the maintenance of the collection is having a new appraisal done. And if we decide to undertake that process this year, that would be an ideal time then to photograph those pieces. The reason those artworks weren't photographed when we did that, the majority of the artworks that were photographed were either stored in the Art Center storage or they were here in City Hall and people physically went and brought them to the setup for the photographer. So the pieces that were not photographed were in more difficult to reach areas, and it was going to be inefficient for staff time to have to go retrieve the artworks or have to go do a separate photography setup just to capture 2 or 3 pieces. So that is something that's on our radar screen. We don't have a concrete plan to do it yet, but it has occurred to me that in the course of doing an appraisal, that may be a perfect time to capture those other pieces.
And related to that, as new pieces come into the collection, do you envision that the photograph of them is taken upon entry, or that it would be done in batch when we, like I'm even thinking of, this lovely piece now behind us, how will the process, and I'm, thinking of the new Mitchell Park pieces that are about to come in and so forth, what would you envision?
With donated portable works, we always request an image. So for instance, the pieces that were, that came in from the Cubberley artists, they all have high quality images that they just sent to me for that purpose.
Okay.
So often we're able to just request that directly from the artist. And certainly the new commissioned works, then we've been under discussion with, do we have Camera Club go out there? Who could we get to take pictures of the artworks once they're sighted?
Great. Thanks. Any other questions on maintenance? No. Okay, let's move on to item number 6. Back to Elise. 10 pieces from the collection. This concept came up when Vice Chair and I and Elise and Rye have been having monthly meetings, and one of the topics was having an ongoing look at what is in our collection, so that over the course of the year we're seeing the pieces, we know what they are, a bit about their history, and it just keeps fresh in our mind instead of just having that one big paper catalog on our desk, elements of our collection.
Well, unfortunately, they reordered, so I'm going to wing it a little bit. But these are the first 10 pieces that we have images of in the collection. And so the first one was acquired in 1972, and the only artist name I have on it is Lemmy. It's called Aurus R8. It is a painting, and it was a gift of the artist, who now lives in Malaysia.
Do we have a value on that one by any chance? I know some of the ones in there we do, some we don't.
We do. That one's I don't know how updated they are. Is 2000. The next one is Walter Bueller. And I apologize, these came out so small. They didn't look so small on my screen. This is the Lytton School, and it is an acrylic painting, and it was acquired in 1969. And it's a rather large piece. It's 48 inches high by 39.5 wide. This piece is by Igor Medvedev. It's an abstraction, Whirls. It's a painting, and it was acquired in 1971, although the piece is not dated. And I guess it was once handled through Franklin Bowles Gallery. It was a gift, it was not a purchase.
What was that piece called?
That piece was called Abstraction Whirls.
And I don't have my catalog with me of all of these, but are all these somewhere displayed, or are they possibly in storage? Do we
It's
know?
a mix. Some are in storage and some are displayed currently.
Okay. So we would look at that as a reference to see if it's up somewhere. Or do you have that on your?
It's in the database.
Yeah, right, but you don't have it on your handout there.
So this piece is a watercolor, Carol Battensby, pardon me. It's called Landmarks, and it was acquired in 1973. This is one of our earliest ones. This was the first one that came up, in fact. This was acquired in 1960 by T.W. Nason, ex libris Mendon Morel. It's an etching. It was a gift to the collection in 1960. This one is Raymond Bros, Memories of the Motherlode. It's a watercolor, and it was acquired in 1973. And it's an artist who studied at Stanford, and it was a purchase award. And this is another one of the early ones. Marion Warren, and this is an untitled piece. It is a print. It was 1960. It was acquired, and it was a gift.
Excuse me.
That one is very dark and hard to see. I apologize. Don Dolan, The American Circus. It's 1960. Again, this is an early one to the collection. It is an etching. This is Catherine Dunning, Firebird. This is one of the ones we're having reframed, incidentally. It's a 1972 piece, and it's an intaglio print. And we're back to the beginning. Incidentally, one of the other early pieces that came up is it's a watercolor that has since been moved to the Civic Center level A. So it now would be easy to photograph, but we didn't actually have an image in there. And it was acquired in 1960. It's a Guy Wallach piece, so if you go look for the tag, you can identify it.
So it's out in the lobby?
It's in level A. It's called Vanishing Vainglory. So?
Thank you. Okay. For your calendar, we're there already. Next meeting, September 19th, Chamber Councils. But related to that, with announcements, we, as you guys have seen over email, have requested a special meeting prior to that. I don't have the date in front of me, but hopefully you've all gotten the email.
The commissioners have been responding really well. So there were 3 dates for special meetings, for planning meetings. There's also a November 18th tentatively scheduled date for our joint meeting with council.
And the next one was August 26th.
Thank you.
At 1 p.m.
And I just wanted to mention to all of you to sort of think about before then that one of the things that we're going to be talking about is effectiveness of subcommittees and talking about how we structure them and what they're structured around and possible changes in that. One thing I wanted to share that I just learned today, that if any of you are interested in joining the fundraising subcommittee, Ally has stepped down from that one. So that's one that's has an opening on it right now. But come with your ideas on, and Amanda and I are meeting in advance of that meeting as well to bring some specific thoughts on it. So if any of you have things you want to share prior to us all getting together, let one of us know. That would be helpful. Any other announcements that people have?
Well, I have announcements. Are we finished with the calendar items first?
We are.
Okay. So then for announcements, I just wanted to briefly let the commission know that we have been in discussion with some of the other staff and city manager regarding the upcoming renovations here in City Hall on the ground floor. As you know, there's been a lot of discussion about redoing that lobby space and a reconfiguration of the ground floor, and a lot of those details are still very much in flux. However, it looks like we are likely going to be able to commission a new media piece that could be significant in the lobby. And so it's something we're very excited about. We are still researching the funding options and how that would work, but the idea is that we would have an impactful new media piece in the lobby. So we will definitely keep you up to date as those details unfold, but that could be a very exciting undertaking for the commission as well.
Thanks, Elise. Any other announcements? No? Okay, with that, I adjourn our meeting tonight. Thank you, everyone.